Thank you. Well, good morning to you all. My Uncle Cleveland was a big guy, a round guy with a pot belly, and he always seemed to have on dress pants that were high water. He looked like the kind of guy you could walk right up to and give a bear hug, but he wasn't a bear hug kind of guy. He was more of an intellectual. He was college educated, one of the first back then, but he'd worked most of his adult life for one company, doing one job for one reason. And one day, the company decided that Mr. Cleveland was no longer relevant. And so, as his usual self at the family gathering, there he was in the front room, but not making us laugh, not giving us wisdom, but ruminating a bit, as he talked about what it is he'd want for his 3 children. First thing I want is that they know their African American history. And then I want them to be college educated. And if they can take $1 and turn it into 2, I've done my job. He was thinking about his experiences and starting to realize, what is it I can give my children so that they stay relevant? Well, many things have changed since 20 years ago. Number one, we'll work for more than one company, it's likely. We'll have 7 to 8 different careers in our lifetime. And we certainly won't be retiring at 65. And we're living to 100 years old, the boomer exchange. But the one thing that's the same is that we need to be relevant. Relevant in our work, relevant in our lives, our community, our churches, and in our parenting. Relevant. So you heard Cody talk about some of the things I've had an opportunity to do. I've worked with extraordinary leaders all over the world, and not just in my work, but in the churches and in the community. And from that experience, I've come to know, in my own way, what it takes to be fearless, to be a fearless leader. And I believe that is the key today to being relevant, to be fearless. So when I talk about fearlessness, I want to just clarify with a little housekeeping. It's kind of an oxymoron that to be fearless, fear has to be present. But the fearless leader moves through the fear anyway. To be fearless, risks are in the equation. The fearless leader assesses the risk, accepts the risk, and moves forward anyway. He or she decides, let the chips fall where they may, and I'll deal with it. Fearless leader. Now, if you can, I want you to stand to your feet if you consider yourself a leader. Do you consider yourself a leader? Stand to your feet. Beautiful. Thank you. Because each and every one of us are leaders. We have an obligation to bring our best game, to challenge the status quo, to leave the place better than it was when we found it. Thank you. You may be seated. You're thinking, how long are we going to be standing? So now we're clear about what fearless is and what a fearless leader looks like. I want to talk to you about the acronym for the words that I've used to define fearless. The acronym is spelled BWAVE. And we're not going to talk about all of those characteristics. I only want to talk about one today. But I love it that the acronym actually spells something, number one, and that it's related to fearless. And so I'd like to share how you pronounce it through the voice of a legend that you may all know, the famous, world-renowned cartoon character, Elmer Fudd. And Elmer Fudd would say, a fearless leader is brave. He's brave, he is, he's brave. Now, the B in brave is for boldness. Boldness is required absolutely to be a fearless leader. And you know, when you're bold, you'll take on adversity. When you're bold, you'll go against popular opinion. You have to be bold. Some of you may have seen a news account a couple of weeks ago in Florida, a guy named Eddie Peoples, home on military leave. He's at Bank of America with his 2 young children. The bank's being robbed. His children are giggling because they think it's a joke. draws the attention of the robber. So Eddie takes everything in him and he tries to stop the robbery. And there he is with a gun pointed to his forehead. He uses one arm to move the guy's wrist. He takes the other one and with the full weight of his body, he tackles him to the ground until the authorities come. Bold, right? And hopefully we won't ever have to be that bold in our lifetime. They later learn that the gun was empty. The gun was empty, right? But he didn't know that. Was there fear present? Absolutely. Were there risks? Yes. But the gun was empty. 99% of what we worry about and what we're fearful of never comes to fruition. Fear, false evidence appearing real. False evidence appearing real. So as I talk about boldness, you're going, I love it. I want to talk about boldness. I want to leave with you 3 practices that will help you improve your boldness and have that foundation that is necessary to be a fearless leader and thus stay relevant. The first practice is this: embrace change. Every day, do something that takes you out of your comfort zone. It doesn't have to be anything big. You could change your ringtone to a Latin song. You could buy a coffee for someone that looks different than you, that you don't spend much time with. There's a brief story I want to share about sharecroppers. These were the families right after slavery, and they made their money in the fields. When the kids were old enough to work, you bet they went to work because that means more household income. Well, in this case, the son wanted to go to college. He was already reading, so were the mom and dad, but he had a desire to go to college. They didn't understand it, but they were bold enough to let him go to college as opposed to working in the field. He went on to win many prestigious honors, was a great inventor, and even had dinner in the president's home, George Washington Carver. Bold parents who took a bet on their son. The second practice is to play the hand you're dealt. Play the hand that you're dealt. Another way to say it is bloom where you're planted. This is where you are, deal with it. And I think of this story that I think is so relevant, and it's about a nanny goat who gets caught in a dry well. And he's stuck in a rut. How many of you know the feeling of being stuck in a rut? And as he's stuck in the rut, they can't figure out how they're going to get the nanny goat out of the well. And they think, let's put him out of his misery and just toss some dirt in over him. They toss the dirt in, and the nanny goat takes 2 steps and shakes it off. And they said, well, he's still out a little bit. Let's put some more dirt in there. And you know, sometimes your boss is giving you more work. The better work you do, the more work you get. And sometimes you're trying to have a good relationship with your husband, and the more you try to explain, the more he throws some dirt in. But the nanny goat just took 2 steps and he'd shake it off. And before long, with all the things that were coming to him in the place where he felt like he was stuck in a rut, he just kept shaking and stepping. He was back even with the ground and out of the well. Play the hand you dealt. Play the hand you dealt until you rise to the position you should be in. And the last practice is to be willing to walk away. To be willing to walk away. And it's a lot easier to say than it is to do. It's probably one of the toughest things we'll ever do. And as I told a good friend, it's not about having a place to walk away to. It's about being willing to walk away without even having a clue of your options. In 2005, I was in my doctor's office, and they had a beautiful view of Rice University. You could see the track field. So you got a contrast of green trees, a black track field, and white chalk, and runners each in their lanes preparing to run. Some sprint, stretch, exercise. And it was April. And in Houston, it's not as hot as it is now in April. It was just warm, really warm. Warm like the tears that were coming down my face as he explained to me the diagnosis from the battery of tests that I'd undergone. And I listened to him as he talked about what I was going to need for this rare disease. It had this huge name, arrhythmogenic right ventricle dysplasia, ARVD. I had no idea what that was. And he said, well, you know what, I don't want you to have another cardiac event. And so here's the deal. Let's put it in, or you'll never brainstorm in a meeting room again. More tears. Let's put it in, or you won't be able to cheer for your sons at baseball. You won't have any quality of life. And I sat there and I listened and I cried. And as Ayanna Vincent says, I cried with an agenda. I cried with an agenda to say, I choose life. I chose life in that moment. It didn't make things easier. There were a couple of struggling years after that. But it all came full circle. And it all reminds me every time when my quality of life is compromised to be willing to walk away. It's too short and it's not promised. Happy to report that I've renamed ARVD to already receive victory over death. You see, death was the one thing I feared the most. And you know how you conquer your fear? You look it in the eye and say, I choose life. Now, I'd like for you to close your eyes just for a moment. Close your eyes, play with me, and think about it. If everything was to end right now, if the game were over now, lights out, would you have any regrets? Is there anything you might do differently? In the words of Julio Alala, he says, a life without boldness is a life filled with regrets. You can open your eyes. And I want to share with you a poem that has meant a great deal to me, and I think it'll mean the same for you. Our deepest fear is not that we're inadequate. It is our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light and not our darkness that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God, and your playing small doesn't serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that others can feel comfortable around you. You were meant to shine as children do. We were born to manifest the glory of God that is within us. And it's not just in some of us, it's in all of us. And when we let our own light shine, we unconsciously allow other people to do the same. As we liberate ourselves from our own fear, we also unconsciously liberate others. Thank you.